Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, man? It is Scott Groves, ladies and gentlemen. We are doing our second podcast live in the Las Vegas studio. So I'm excited to have old friend of mine, Helmer not just Helmer J. Helmer, buddy of mine from the mortgage space. Kind of crazy, has this wicked story about, being in the mortgage space. Actually, I think you were originally in like vacuum repair sales or vacuum door-to-door sales.
I sold Electrolux vacuum cleaners door to door, man. That's how I learned how to sell.
See, nobody grows up wanting to be in the mortgage industry. They grow up failing at something else or really succeeding about something else and then being like, wait a minute, if I can sell a $200 vacuum cleaner, I can definitely sell a $200,000 mortgage.
No, it was even better than that. Like, nobody shits on anything like they shit on vacuum cleaner salesmen. I mean, door-to-door vacuum cleaner sales, I bet you that job sucks. You're like, oh, I've never heard that one before.
I just got the inference, by the way. That job sucks. That's really good.
And so, here I am. This is back when direct sales, it wasn't dead yet. The internet hadn't come out. This is in the late 90s that I was selling vacuum cleaners. And when I got in the mortgage business, I was so excited because I'm like, I'm getting in a legitimate business now. I'm gonna be a mortgage guy. And it was only after I got roped in for a while that I went, wow, it was a lot more legitimate when I sold vacuum cleaners.
So sell vacuum cleaners, sell mortgages. 2009 comes, and then you're like, screw this mortgage business. This sucks. Then you started an app development company and sold apps in the early days of the iPhone. And now you run a wildly successful online business called Originator Success. So can you walk us through, this could be a long story, vacuum sales to mortgage to developing apps to being like, I'll probably go back to the mortgage industry, but I want to do tech in mortgage.
You know what? It was always, how can I make money? And I didn't go to college. I wasn't going to go to college. And even though I had been recruited by West Point, I had scholarships available to some pretty prestigious schools. But for my own reasons, I wasn't going to go to college. I told everyone I'm going to take a year off. And that was the kiss of death. And then
says everybody 25 years ago.
And I'm like, I am not ever going to go to college. So I answered an ad in the paper to be an assistant manager, and I got roped into selling vacuum cleaners. In the first week, I sold 5 vacuum cleaners. I made $1,000. I was 19 years old. I'm like, this is easy. And it wasn't easy, but it's
was this in the 80s, 90s,
no,
2000s?
It's late 90s. I only graduated high school in 94. So this is like late 90s, probably like 95, 96. And, there's definitely, I could keep everybody entertained with stories of, I not only sold vacuum cleaners, but part of the reason that I did it was because I had lost my driver's license. Not for anything cool, but in the state of New Jersey in the mafia, and I don't mean like the legitimate one like the Sopranos, I mean the insurance mafia. When you don't have insurance on your vehicle in the state of New Jersey, you lose your license for a year. Now, if you have a DWI, you lose it for 30 days. So you can like mow somebody down and you're fine. But if you don't have insurance when you do it, then you're, so it just kind of built, and I was in a whole big thing. So here I am selling vacuum cleaners. I have no driver's license. I would have somebody drop me off in a neighborhood with a vacuum, and I wouldn't call to get picked up until the vacuum was sold. And I had to sell a vacuum because around that point was when I met the love of my life and, got married and had a couple kids. So not necessarily in that order. And it was a necessity. I had to sell vacuum cleaners. I had to make money. It was commission sales, and it was something I could always do very well at, make good money at. So I did that.
So wait a minute. We're not talking about like 1950s, death of a salesman, door-to-door Amway. We're talking about the 90s. Like, the internet is starting to become a thing. MTV is still playing music. But, like, to me, the idea of a door-to-door salesman in 96, 97, which is when I would have been graduating high school, like, had you walked up to my front door and been like, hey, is your mom home? We're testing vacuums. I would have been like, get the fuck out of here, you serial killer. Like, that had to be a really rough time in
No, it was awesome. It was a great time. And then
really?
What happened too is so I sold vacuum cleaners for quite a while. And then I was only 21 and I became a manager. So I had to manage my own store. And I got, of course, like a really crappy store up in Sussex, New Jersey, which was a little nowheresville. And I turned that store around. I made it like one of the best stores in New Jersey. And I won all these awards in the President's Club and the trips and the money. And what's funny is that was where I got the nickname Helmer, by the way, was a guy named Peter Fabiano. He's a regional vice president at Electrolux. And this guy, he was just everything you could think of sales. He was very excited and always there. And hey, Scott, and just very. He never would have. He would have killed him in COVID because everyone would have thought he was spitting all over the place. So he was just that guy and that personality. And I was a manager, and he came to visit my store. And they had a checklist, and they wanted to see you're in sales and you're hiring people to take a job that they don't want to take, which is commission selling vacuum cleaners. And you had to really exude success. So I dressed well and I had, nice stuff. And he's like, all right, let me see your car. And I said, well, I don't have a car. He goes, what do you mean you don't have a car? I said, well, of course I don't have a car. He goes, what do you mean of course you don't have a car? I said, well, I don't have a driver's license. He goes, what? I said, I don't have a driver's license. Why would I have a car? He goes, you can't be a manager and not have a driver's license. I said, why not? He goes, it's just not acceptable. I'm pulling you out at the end of the day. Like you're done. And I looked at him and I said, have you seen my numbers? And he goes, well, they're good. I'm like, look again. And he looked at him again and he goes, you do a really good job. All right, you're making this work. And that was the last he ever said of it. And that was it. And then he used to use me as a success story. Look at this guy. He does this. He doesn't even have a driver's license. And that was kind of his thing. And on the conference calls, he used to always call me the Hammer because I could close anything. That was how I actually got that nickname, was because I was a closer. I could close anything.
The funny thing is, I knew you for about a year before I realized that Hammer wasn't your real name. And I think we were sitting around like this in San Diego having a cigar. And I was like, yeah, I got to ask, Hammer, like, were your parents like stoners, hippies, German, like they were real big into Thor, or like, what the fuck is going on? You're like, you idiot. That's not my real name. This is a nickname that somebody gave me 20 years ago. I'm like, oh, like everywhere it says Hammer. I'm like, I just assumed that was your real name.
So anyway, one day I did end up getting into the mortgage business. The way I got into the mortgage business, we'll fast forward through the vacuum cleaner stories. And I had bought my first condo. And that was where I really got a taste of the mortgage business, because somebody lied to me, screwed me over, took weeks and weeks and weeks, ruined my deal, and I got saved by, the title company referred me to a mortgage guy, and he swept in, pulled it together, saved the deal. And a couple years later, I said, my wife went back to this guy, Mike, and I said, Mike, my wife wants a house. We're going to sell the condo and get a house. And he looked at all my documents, and he said, what happened to your income? I said, well, I'm on a new income structure. I work twice as hard. I make half as much.
Oh, it's called management?
Yeah. Well, that was actually, they were getting ready to sell the stores. So anyway, he's like, oh, you should get in the mortgage business. Now, I've always been offered jobs because I have that kind of personality. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, how much did you make last year? And he says $180,000. Now, when a salesman tells you he made $180,000, it usually means he made what, $120? Mm-hmm. We all know how salesmen kind of, like, the fish was this big.
Right.
And I said, you show me a W-2 with $180,000, and I will work for you right now. It was a Wolf of Wall Street moment. Everyone always says that. I'm like, I swear that is exactly how it went down.
Dude, that scene with him with the fake teeth, he's like, you show me a paycheck right now for $87,000. I quit my job. I work for you. It's like, it's so good. Everything in that movie.
You. And what's funnier is you had to know the environment. He had left GMAC Mortgage and he moved over to Gateway Funding, and they were a new company back then. And he was starting his own net branch. So he had just rented an office in an old building in an old part of town. He had a door for a desk because he was waiting for furniture. So here I am in an office with a guy with a door and a folding table. And I'm like, show me your pay stub with $180,000 and I will work for you right now. And he did. He really did make $180,000. So I said, all right, I got to do this, because I really was making less money. And I'm like, I could see the writing on the wall. And I transitioned. And the first loan I ever wrote was a refinance for $80,000 to a woman that I sold a vacuum cleaner to. And as I took her credit up, I said, hey, by the way, so you're getting divorced. How about refinancing your house? And that was the first application I took back when I did mortgages.
And so how many years did you do mortgages for?
I wrote loans for a decade, just a little over a decade. Nice. And I went broke in 2008 when the industry tanked.
Every loan officer has the same origin story. It's like, yeah, I was doing this in the mortgage industry, then I went broke in 2008, and the story either goes, I stayed broke for a few years and then made a comeback, or I went and got another job for a couple of years, and then somehow, just like the mob, it sucks you back in. You end up back in the fucking mortgage industry somehow.
For me, it was still, what I could make in the mortgage business. It was half of what I had been making, but it was still double what I was going to make doing anything else.
Right.
So I made it through when we rebuilt. And that's what really got me interested in the idea of kind of taking business online. That was in 2008 when everything tanked, and you're rebuilding 2009, 2010. That was when the internet really started to kind of take off from a sales point of view. Frank Kern did mass conversion. There was a lot more of that. And I had thought to myself, man, I wish I'd gotten in on that internet thing. And I thought it was over. I thought that was the internet. And what happened is I really wanted to position my business so that I could move. I didn't want to stay in New Jersey. Going bankrupt had made me very aware of that. But we had we had kids in school, and my wife and I, we agreed we weren't going to move while the kids were in school. And I'm like, how do I build a business in the mortgage business that I can leave? And now that's, it's common. You can do business across state lines and it's not a big deal. But, 10, 12 years ago, that was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And so that's what got me interested in digital marketing. And what really made me realize how much money you could make on the internet was in 2010. Do you remember when we had the good faith? You wrote loans back then, right?
Yeah.
Remember we had the good faith estimate changed from a regular GFE to the 2010 GFE.
Yeah.
And a guy named Tim Kearns, he had done a webinar, and he invited me to speak on this webinar because of some stuff that I had written on the internet that he had read, and it went really well. And I was just a loan officer, so I'm like, hey, this is cool. I'm on this webinar thing, right? And I spoke. We kind of ran long. Everybody loved it. And he said, you are the best presenter I've ever seen. I want you to take this product and take it out public for me. And it was called Rate Alert. So it was helped mortgage people kind of figure out what was going on in the mortgage market so they knew which way rates were going. At the time, there was only one big company that did that and one big prominent name in the industry. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it. And I said, but before we do that, I've got this idea for this 2010 GFE. I want to teach everybody how to go out and sell with it. Everybody's complaining about it, and they're negative.
Sky is falling.
Right?
No consumer will ever understand this.
Yeah, nobody likes change. But I'm like, but if you just turn, if we just turn it just this way, you could sell with this, and you'll sound so different from everybody else. And he's like, I love that. So I knew he was busy. He was a CEO. I'm like, give me the name of your assistant, and I'll make this thing work. And what the reason it was so good is because he was the guy that actually got started with Frank and Brian. And back then they were Think Big, Work Small. Now they're National Real Estate Post. And I think they're even separated now, but they had an audience. They had, really gotten big with the video scene, and they had an audience, and I had the content. And I said, you've got the audience, I've got the content. So we did a 50-50 split. I did 4 webinars we did them for like $47 a piece it was to be on the webinar. And we made $45,000 on 4 webinars, and I made half that. And my wife's car, the engine had hydro seized, and I had just gotten this check for $21,000, and I went and bought a new car with it. And I'm like, this is friggin' awesome. Yeah. I like this.
Do a webinar, buy a car. Do a webinar, buy a car.
I'm like, a month worth of webinars. I spent, 8 hours total on this, and, I made $21,000. And that's where I was hooked. That's where I was absolutely hooked on the idea of digital marketing. So we took Rate Alert out, we grew it, and I saw that becoming a recurring revenue for him. I can't disclose things, but I will say that it was, it was north of $60,000 a month, and it was just recurring revenue on a, $37 a month or 20, I don't know, whatever it was at the time, that kind of a product. And I'm like, wow, this is cool, because the problem with the mortgage business is that you've got to go out and get new loans every day, every week, every month. And you've got some equity built up with your referral partners and with your past clients, but it's not like insurance where you're getting a residual.
Yeah.
You've got to get out and fish every single day. And I said, I want to fish farm. I want to find a way to keep this money coming in. Mm-hmm. And when I saw, and the success that Rate Alert had was a big foundation for what we ended up building Originator success on, with a recurring revenue model, subscription, members, delivering, content and value to them on a regular basis. And that's, from a business point of view, as an entrepreneur, that was much more attractive to me than a lot of going out, getting new coaching or new, the programs and courses, and that was always a lot of, you just had to constantly be doing it, constantly be selling something. So that's kind of how I evolved from vacuums to mortgage, and then from mortgage, while I was doing mortgage was when we had the iPhone game studio. That was a lot of fun. There's nothing better than looking at someone and going, yeah, I lost over $100,000 on that deal. And they're like, what? But when you're in business, you don't look at it as money, because you're making money, you're losing money, but it's all part of the process. And we actually were growing that very well. but it was growing so fast. I had to make a choice where I was going to take in venture capital, bring someone else in. I had bootstrapped it, and it was getting to the point where we need to get to bigger platforms, or I need to shut it down. And
so wait, you were still writing mortgages as you were building apps in the App Store?
I had a whole team because I wasn't doing any of that. I had at the time, my right-hand guy here at Originator Success, he was the one that managed everything for that. He would go find the developers, the artists. I was just having fun like a kid in a candy store going, I have a really cool idea. Let's pretend that it's a bubbly cannon. Let's connect the dots to it. And they have to do, like, I would just come up with game designs. We went to, San Francisco and went to the gaming convention, and it was just cool, fun stuff. And then I would hand it to him. We had a meeting every Wednesday for about 3 hours. And then he would bring stuff to me and say, this is here's how it's working. Here's how it goes. We got involved with that. The guy, Frank Kern, is a very, very well-known internet marketer, probably one of the best known. And his cousin is Trey Smith. Trey Smith had a program, which here again shows you how the internet can make money. You had to wire him. He wouldn't even use a credit card. You had to wire him $10,000 to be a part of that program. So I wired him $10,000. And he showed us how he was getting success with the games that he had. And there were a bunch of people that did the same thing I did. He made $1 million on his launch on that. And we all just, really learned a lot and then started building our own games. And, but like I said, that's a rough industry. And it got to where you really had to be on multiple platforms as it was growing in popularity. And it just wasn't where I saw myself long-term. So... And
what's the economics of, like, obviously there's these outliers like Angry Birds and the Bejeweled games and stuff like that make all kinds of big boy money. But if you're putting capital in to design an app to get it launched on the App Store or the Google Play Store or whatever, and then obviously there's in-app purchases, or you can do it for free, or you can sell it for 99 cents. Like, what's the economics of building a game, the cost to build a game, how much money is invested to build the game, and then, like, what's the ongoing cost? Like, does it either go viral or it doesn't, or can you advertise it? Can you, like you said, be on different platforms? Like, what does the evolution of an app look like?
So it's slightly different now, but not really that much different now. And back then, what would happen is the model that we went after was to go for easy to make, low cost games. We weren't trying to do Clash of Clans, or that was big, or Candy Crush, that was big at the time. We were trying to do smaller games that were what we call a freemium model. So like you said, these are games that you would download and play for free. They would have in-app purchases, and people that would, you would have these power users that would spend a ton of money in the game. And that's where I really learned that you don't make money from everybody. 100 people are going to download your game. 97 of them, they're just going to play the free version. And they're going to see the ads. And that's partly where you would make your money, is you would have ads in the game and they could click on ads and then you made some ad revenue. And that's also how you would advertise your game, is in other games with ads. But 97 people out of 100 never spent $1. But those 3 people that did, they would spend $100. And that was like, you started to realize, like, okay, I don't need to sell to everybody. I need to be in front of everybody, but I only need a small portion of those people to actually give me money to make this lucrative. And that's the same thing that we apply to the model today. I mean, I try to give as much value and content to as many people as I can. I do free lock advice. I do, and people say, well, why do you do that stuff for free? And I say, because I'm passionate about it. I enjoy it. And it does, bring us business. I mean, there's everybody that signs up for us. They sign up because they feel like they know me, they like me, they trust me. I mean, somebody that signed up this week said, Hammer, I feel like I know you. I watch your video every morning. I get your advice every day. He goes, I know we've never met, but I feel like I know you. And I feel like if I'm going to look to somebody to help me grow my business online, I can trust you to do that. And so it helps you in that area. And most of the people, if they never buy, I'm okay with that. And they can just get value, and I'm fine, because the people that do buy, make us a nice living, and we're all happy. Everybody wins.
Yeah. So I'm interested, obviously, the mortgage space, you spend tens of thousands of dollars kind of self-teaching, trial and error, enrolling in courses and masterminds and whatnot. And so you've got foundational mortgage knowledge. Actually, you have extensive mortgage knowledge. You got foundational tech knowledge. And then what's the genesis of Originator success to be like, all right, well, I know technology, I know loan officers, let's offer technology and loan officers, but what problem are we going to solve, or what niche are we going to go into? So what's the origination story, the origin story of Originator success?
So to answer that question, there's one piece in the middle that I left out that we have to put in there because it pulls it together. So I was a loan officer for about 10 years. The same guy that started Rate Alert, that was his side hustle, if you will. And he owned a mortgage lender with about 300 LOs, and he had a couple partners. And he had been working hard on me to be an executive and work for him. I was director of business development. I had an entire pipeline blow up just one too many times of things beyond your control. And I was just like, all right, I'm done. I'm ready to make this move. And I was an executive for 4.5 years doing director of business development. And now it's common in the mortgage industry to have Total Expert and Top of Mind and all these companies that your mortgage company invests in, and the originators are all getting free services of. But I swear to you, in 2010 or 2011, after Mortgage Revolution, which that was a fun event and had its own story, but that's where I met Mark Green. And we were the first ones to have a system-to-system integration, because back then, companies didn't pay for stuff for their loan officers. It hadn't come around yet. And we were the first ones to take our system and their system, and we would feed them loan data after the loan closed. And we would put those people into a campaign for post-closing marketing on behalf of the loan officer. It helped us with retention, helped us with recruiting, and again, everybody won. And the reason we were doing that, and it came with a CRM. And I realized that no matter how much I really pushed, we would get a 13 to 18% adoption on the CRM. Most originators were just too busy and they never did it. And that was where I learned that you have to do things for people rather than teach them how to do it. Because everybody wants the result, but they may not have the time or the consistency to put not the work in. It's not that they're lazy. It's just there's too many things, not enough time in the day. So in 2014, we were setting up Encompass, which is a phenomenally wonderful. No, it's not. Anybody in the mortgage business knows this is a train wreck of a software system. And
for people that don't know what we're talking about, Encompass is the loan operating software system that most mortgage companies are built on. And it's like where you put in the data, where you pull the credit, where you draw your loan documents. And it's just been patched work together over the last, 15, 20 years. So it's like, it makes no sense. Like, why is this field over here and that field over there? We use a similar system called PCL, which is a knockoff of Encompass. And it's like, sure enough, we had a deal the other day that had to close, had to go to docs. And we're talking to the poor underwriter. And the underwriter's like, I'm getting this error alert where this field needs to be cleared. She's like, the loan's approved. You're ready to close. But I've got this box that needs to be checked that has a fill in, and none of it is intuitive. Like anybody that has an iPhone and also has to work on Encompass wants to stick a needle through their eye every day.
It's brutal.
It's brutal.
And it has been, but they were some of the first ones in the arena, and they just grew to the behemoth. And like many systems, like a lot of banking systems, if you do your online banking, they're just old. But they're so big, they can't change, and they haven't updated. So at the time in 2014, it was my job to help get compliance into Encompass, and we were dealing with notices of incompleteness, and these are all just things of regulation timelines, and I hate red tape. I hate that stuff. It's not my forte. I love selling. I love originating and getting business and psychology and marketing and ad copy, and these are the things. And I'm like, I'm miserable, and I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. So I gave notice, and Tim had actually been bought out by his partners in the mortgage company at that point, and I had stayed on, and I was given the ability to stay at Rate Alert and at the mortgage company, which at the time was First Priority Financial. So I worked at both companies, and Tim really wanted me to do Rate Alert full time. So I was like, you know what? I'm done with the mortgage stuff. And I went and did Rate Alert full time, and he paid me really well, but we started to see things differently. And he wanted to grow the company in one direction. I felt it needed to go in another. And I just knew that I needed to be out on my own with my own product. So that's where I started Originator Success in 2014 in October. And the original idea was, I'm going to teach loan originators how to get business from Facebook and Facebook ads. And we're going to teach them how to use funnels. And I said, okay, I need to kind of prove my concept here. So I did what's called a minimum value product, MVP. Or minimum viable product rather. And I said, okay, I'm going to do eight webinars, 8 sessions. and I'm going to do it for 5 people, and I'm going to charge them $3,000, and I'm going to teach them in those 8 sessions. We're going to go through and we're going to set this stuff up with them. I'm going to walk them through. I'm going to hold their hand. There's only 5 of them. This has got to work. This is going to be amazing. And 3 weeks in, out of the 5, guess how many had done any of the tasks?
0.
Yeah, it's an easy. Everyone gets it.
Everyone
first
knows.
Try. 0. And I was just so much like, this sucks, because I know that there's these results for these guys. I just need to get them there. How do I get them there? I'm like, all right, we're going to pivot. So a lot of times you talk in business that you got to pivot. So I pivoted. Now we're going to do lead funnel automation. That was our first product. Originator Success, lead funnel automation. So then what I did is a $1,500 program. This is $1,500 a year. We would build you 3 funnels, and we would give you the ads. All you had to do was place them. And Facebook ads now, I tell people, it's really complicated now. It's gotten to be very different. But back then, it was so easy. And we did all the work. And we just had to set it up. They just had to put the ads in. And people were signing up like crazy. And some of the people that would put the ads in, they were getting great results. They were writing loans. I was all excited. But then there was more than half that never put a loan in, that never put an ad in and never got a loan. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sleeping well at night because I could sell this all day long, but these people aren't getting results. And that really bothers me. And I know it's because they're not doing what we need them to do, but how do we maybe do that for them? And as we were kind of learning, okay, well, maybe we need to do more of that. So then we started running Facebook ads. Then we did a bonus program where we noticed that at the time, a lot of originators, things have changed in 5-6 years, but you couldn't find people online. You couldn't find their phone number. And I'm like, you're in sales. If I want to call you, like I knew, I was like, oh, I got to call this person. So I'd Google them and I find nothing. Or I'd find a LinkedIn and LinkedIn didn't have their contact info. And I'm like, I can't find a phone number. I can't get a hold of this person. So we started a program that we called Brand Blast. And we were putting them on Google and putting them on Facebook. And that worked really well. But the problem was 3 or 4 months later, things would change with Google or with Facebook and the people couldn't keep up with it.
Or they would change companies and never update their
information. Never update their stuff, exactly.
I cannot tell you, by the way, before I met you, and realize, oh, there's somebody out here that does this for you across the board, and it's really cost effective, and this is the best $300 a month I spend. I would do this seminar about twice a year for my coaching clients, and I would just take a random coaching client from the live event or from one of our online webinars, and I'd be like, oh, Michael Ullman, give me your NMLS number. That's the identifier for the people listening of that he's a loan officer. And I would look him up, and sure enough, within the first page of Google, and sometimes the very first hit, would have a previous company, would have an expired web page, would have the wrong phone number, would have the wrong email. And I'm like, bro, you've got to go into Yelp and LinkedIn and Google and call your past company to take down this page and update your current company with the fact to not have the 1-800 number there and have your real phone number. And I used to have clients do this, and I would see, whether it was 3 people on the call or 300 people on the call, everybody shaking their head being like, oh yeah, I got to do that. Yeah. And I would show them, I'd be like, go into an incognito browser, search your name. Now search your name plus mortgage. Now search your name plus loan broker.
And you were showing them, and yours was the worst of all of them.
I know. I was showing them how to do it. And then guess what? Nobody would actually go in and change the data. And I'm like, God forbid an ex-client can even remember your name, which most clients forget their loan officer's name after about 6 months. But goodness forbid the person can even, remember your name. They're going to go try to find you, and there's going to be no chance that they can find you. And so then along comes Originator Success. And you solved all my problems that I knew I had, but I didn't know somebody out there fixed it for me.
Well, and that's it. And I always tell everybody I have a unique talent stack because I have a lot of digital marketing experience. I have loan origination experience. I have loan executive experience. I know compliance and marketing. I know UDAP and Reg Z and Reg N and all the nasty, ugly alphabets that you have to know and all the silly things that go with that. And that's what allows us to we evolved where we went from trying to teach it to do it. And I always wanted it to be affordable and scalable. And I struggled with scalable for a while, but affordable was always a key because the worst thing that would piss me off is that marketers would charge $1,500 and they're like, oh, well, if you do one loan and you make this, and I'm like, nobody wants to work for free. And they don't realize we're not e-commerce. You're not selling this can of seltzer here. So if I need to, sell this can, it's easy. I can drop ship it, boom. Well, there's a lot of work. Imagine that we had to actually find the water for the seltzer and build the can for this. That's what doing a loan is like. So the idea that you got a loan and then you did the loan and you broke even, well, that just means I had to work harder and make the same amount because I gave it to you. So we kept it very cheap. And what we did is we only work with mortgage people not because I can't do it for other industries, but because by doing it in one industry, we know exactly what Google is looking for mortgage. We know exactly how to set up the Facebook pages, the LinkedIn profiles, the Instagram pages, and that's part of it too, is the evolution. Like now, Instagram is becoming much more popular for loan originators. So now as we do a setup process, what we didn't even do a year ago was set up an Instagram. Now we're working at helping them set up an Instagram, and we're posting for them on Instagram. And what we did is we evolved with what was getting results and what our members were asking for. And then if they didn't implement it, we said, how do we implement it for them? So like, for example, we do all the Google stuff, the Facebook, all the online presence stuff, and we update it, we keep it optimized, and they don't have to think about it. We post content. And that was the thing. Like, loan officers would say to me, Helmer, you're so good at this. Can you come up with content for us? Can you come up with a post for us? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll start doing that. So I started putting these posts up. And then I would say, hey, did you put up that post this week? It was a really good post. And they were like, I was going to do it on Monday, and then I had this appraisal go bad on this deal, and I had to deal with that. And then the answer was no, they didn't do it. And I'm like, all right, we're going to do it for you. So then now we auto post all their content, and we do that. And then I was like, hey, we know that, I was an originator for a long time, and CRMs weren't popular back in the early 2000s. I'm like, but this is where the gold is. You've got to be in front. Like you said, loan officers, they're going to do a loan, and 6 months later, they think everybody is going to just call them because they were so happy. Of course they were happy when you got the house, but they don't remember your name 6 months later unless you remind them of it. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, are you sending this stuff out? So we gave everybody a CRM, which is a contact relationship management system for those that don't speak that language. And what we found is the more bells and whistles, the more excited I got, but the less it got used, because everybody has to take the time to learn it and use it. And so I'm like, okay, strip that all out. We're not going to do that. We're going to go with very, very simple. So like every once in a while, someone in our system will be like, well, where do I see who opened up the email? And I'm like, you don't. And they're like, you don't? And I'm like, you don't. Because do you really care if they open the email? Or would you rather they called you and said, hey, by the way, I need a loan? They're like, well, I want the call. I'm like, exactly. So who cares who opened the email? Well, let us deal with that. You just worry about taking the calls. And that's what everything, we built this on the idea that we'll do it for you. It's turnkey. And we focus on the results. And we don't try to give a lot of information and bells and whistles anymore. We keep it really simple, because the one thing I used to hear was, oh, I'm really not using it. And so we're like, okay, we'll use it for you. Then you don't have to worry about using it. And that's what we do.
Yeah. I remember we had this where when we first started Consolidated Coaching, poor Chris probably spent, oh God, I'm embarrassed to say, probably 10,000 man hours that I paid for of building this app and adapting this app for the mortgage business and setting it up so people could track their numbers. And so they could do this. And then we coordinated their picture from Facebook with their profile, with their this, with their that. And I had more people quit coaching because they were getting the great content from our webinars that we did, but they're like, yeah, but every couple days I get a text message reminding me that I'm not using this really flashy piece of software app thing that, I don't know if I need to use it, but I'm not using it. So I guess I'm not, I feel guilty. I guess I'm not getting everything out of the coaching that you guys have to offer. So I'm going to quit. Mm-hmm. So we were doing what we thought were value adds. They were actually a negative return on investment. And it took us probably, because I was so emotionally attached to that fucking app that Chris spent so much time building.
I'm right there with you.
Oh my God. That we probably shut it down a year
I
after.
still know the name of it.
Yeah, what's it called?
Coach Accountable.
Coach Accountable. Yeah. And it's a great piece of software. A lot of physical trainers use it. And the company was great. And the support girl was great. And they would always jump on the phone and walk through stuff with us. And we would post this is so embarrassing. Every single day, our daily lead gen video, we would post there, and Chris would watch it to make sure it uploaded. And then I would go back 4 days later and be like, one view. Oh, and that was Chris. It was Chris, right. And then finally, we posted on Facebook in our private members only Facebook group, and everybody watches it because everybody's already on Facebook.
Right. You've got to be where they are.
And I hate Facebook, and I want to get off of Facebook, and I think Facebook is the evil empire, and I have to have it for work, and it's gross. But it's okay.
No, and everything you said, that was what took us. That's what we grew every year from October of 2014, to 2015 revenue, 16, 17, 18. We increased every year, but it was kind of that hockey stick.
Yep.
You have a very small increase, and then all of a sudden you hit a corner and you just go straight up. And for us, that was when I finally listened to a business coach that had given me the same advice. And I listened to my right-hand guy who would say it to me all the time. And just like you said, I was emotionally invested. We were offering Facebook ads and how to do your own Facebook ads, and we'll run Facebook ads for you. We had landing pages, and we had all these different things, and I was so excited about all these tools. And in 2020, I admitted that I was done. All these different things, and people weren't using them. I had fancy little names for every tool. We had Originator Success Lead Sites. That was our website. And people would say, what's my website? And no one ever said lead site but me, because I thought, hey, lead generating website, it's a lead site. And I thought it was the most cool thing ever. And nobody else knew what I was talking about.
So I got to show you this. I'm not going to show this to the camera. That Stripe going back to 2015 when we started the coaching business.
Right.
And that's our total revenue that we've ever collected. More than half of that was last year. Because exactly, here's trial and error, Scott being emotionally tied to what I thought the client needed. And then there's us taking off when we gave the client what they wanted.
Yeah.
And it's the hockey stick, exactly as you talked about.
Same thing.
And I just discovered that the other day on Stripe, because I didn't know Stripe kept a forever graph. Right. And so I looked at it, I was like, dude, I paid Chris for 4 years before we made any money.
Yeah.
And then it just goes...
And that's it. And it was the same thing for us. And that's what I learned KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And, every once in a while, someone will say, well, I really want this feature, this feature, this feature. And I say, that's fantastic. And you'll find a product that gives you that. It's not ours.
Right.
What we deal with is the person who doesn't want to deal with all those things. They just want their phone to ring and for someone to say, hey, I found you on Google. I read your reviews and I need a loan. The other day, like you talked about getting a big loan from Facebook, a really big loan. But the other day, someone told me they closed a $1.7 million loan from somebody that called them on Facebook, on Google. And it blows my mind, because you would think, that's a $2.5–3 million house. Yeah. And you would think, somebody of that income and economic stature, they're going to have, a financial advisor.
Yeah, those people are making $100,000 a month.
They're going to have somebody that's no, they went to Google and looked for somebody to find them a mortgage. That's what people do now. Yeah. And so we just recognized that opportunity for originators. We recognized what pain they had and how to fix it. And eventually got out of my own way and just started focusing on, we said, instead of trying to be good at all these things, we're going to be great at this. We're going to get loan originators, mortgage people. We're going to get them loans from Google and social media. And that's what we do.
So I think there's 3 things about your business that I love. And I want to know if these are by design, if they came from trial and error. Maybe you don't even know they're things I love, but there's 3 things I love about your business. Number 1, it's month to month with no contracts. So as soon as you told me that, I'm like, oh, this guy clearly puts his money where his mouth is, because he's not trying to trick me into a year contract or paying $5,000 up front or sign up. Maybe we'll onboard you and then you're locked in for 2 years. So I love that. I love that the onboarding was brutal, where you were like, hey, I need you for 2 focused hours. I need you to have every single password for every system you have, and we're going to do it. We're going to get it done. And then I'm never going to bug you again.
Yep.
And then number 3, you actually delivered on that promise that, like, I'll start getting email responses about some email I sent out, or I'll look on Facebook and I'll have 30 notifications about some freaking ridiculous meme you put up that a bunch of realtors wanted to comment on. And I never worry about it. I was telling you before we started that in 2 years of being on your program, we've had to get in touch with your customer service twice. Once because I screwed up and entered my password wrong so many times on LinkedIn, because I never go on there. You do everything on LinkedIn for me. I entered my password wrong so many times, I had to reset it. So I had to get in touch with you for that. And then another time I screwed up and uploaded all my realtors to the client portal, so they were going to get the wrong drip campaign. I'm like, oh shit, somebody's got to unwind this. So other than that, it's month to month, just do all the hard work up front and then deliver without having to bug me. How much of that from the beginning was by design? How much of that evolved? And how often do you hear the same thing about why people love your business?
I hear that all the time, and it was by evolution, not design. So the evolution was when we simplified, and the onboarding process, like you said, it's 90 minutes and it's intense, and we do everything there. And we always say to everybody, you can multitask and answer emails and work on a file. We're going to do all the heavy lifting, but you need to be on that call so you can see everything that we're doing. And in fact, we're revamping our process now. I'm bringing on another new employee, and they're going to be learning the onboarding. And our onboarding is changing because the needs of our clients are changing. Like I said, now we've got Instagram, and that means that we need to incorporate that into our onboarding. And what we're finding too is when you see your business is lacking somewhere, then you need to address it. So, for example, my right-hand guy who monitors all of our support tickets says, listen, we're getting a consistent stream of people who don't know how to upload their contacts after the initial call. So that means that because our initial call is so overwhelming, then there's so many things that we're doing that they're not retaining that information. We're not spending enough time on it. So we're going to revamp our onboarding call. And what we're going to do is work a little bit harder to get access to everything that we need to do a little bit of it. Like one of the things that impressed you, and it's very impressive to anybody that goes through our onboarding process, is they see us going through and doing this complete audit of their entire online presence and Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, all this stuff. And seeing it is always very impressive. So I've always liked that because people see that we're actually, what's going into that. But we're gonna pull some of that to the backside. In other words, we're gonna get access. We're gonna do some of the most important things up front, and then we're gonna have somebody come and do a sweep afterwards the next day or just immediately after that call. And they're gonna make some of those updates, and we're gonna spend more time using our dashboard and how to upload people into the system, because that's what we found. That's where we're maybe failing. And you have to recognize. So like one way to treat that, you go, well, I'm going to make a video and we're going to send this to people afterwards. And we're going to send them 3 videos and they're going to watch them and they'll know. No, they won't. No, they won't. Nobody's ever going to watch the video. I don't ever watch it. I sign up for stuff and I get that. And I appreciate that drip campaign. I'm like, look at how well they're trying to train me. And I have not watched one of those. So
this makes me feel like Tommy Boy, where he's like, yeah, me and her got it on. And he's like, no, you didn't. He's like, yeah, but I have a friend who got it on with her. He's like, no, you didn't. And it's like, but you can imagine. He's like, nope, can't even imagine. It's like yeah. You can send loan officers because, to your point about picking what works and what doesn't work. I was talking about this the other day with a friend of mine. We're like, hey, remember the good old days where all you had to do was close a loan for a realtor and you became their preferred realtor and they sent you deals?
Yeah, you were their lender.
And now you got to be their psychologist. You got to do the marketing. You got to send the closing gift. You got to do the post-closing campaign. You got to have your upfront video series to educate the client on the stuff that the realtor should probably
and let them take credit for all of it.
And that's fine. Great. And then just, what a great job, Mr. and Mrs. Realtor. And so, to your point, like the company, I'm sure companies are saying the same thing. Like, hey, remember when all we had to do was close loans at a decent price and loan officers loved us? But now it's like we got to be their marketing wing and we got to help with their reimbursements and we got to send them the coolest t-shirts in the market. And it's like, Jesus, man, the market has just evolved so much where our expectations are so high. And what I like is that you guys, again, whether this is evolved or just by design originally, you guys have set the expectation with what you guys do well. You execute on that, and you've got the product knowledge. Like when we were doing the onboarding, I think I had it on some of my websites that like I was open 24 hours. And you're like, bro, Google knows loan officers are not open 24 hours. You're not an emergency plumber. You're not an emergency, locksmith or something like that. Change it from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or whatever. Right. You'll get more traffic. And then just the simple shit of like, hey, on one website, you're loan officer Scott Groves. On another website, you're Scott Groves, the mortgage broker. On another, a website, you're vice president of operations for Guaranteed Rate, which I don't know why everybody at Guaranteed Rate is a vice president. A little jab there to my buddies at Guaranteed Rate. But just having it all consistent where Facebook business page, LinkedIn, Yelp, Google, it all says what it says. It all looks exactly the same. It's just like, why is this stuff? Well, let me ask you this. Why is that so important? Like, why is that so important to the world of the internet that Scott Groves looks consistent across all sites?
Well, part of it is because Google is looking at all those sites. And if you confuse Google, Google won't put you to be the best search result. Google is manipulated. Let's not pretend it's not. But at the same point, Google's actual search algorithm is designed to provide the best results for what somebody is looking for. So then you have to... It's like a good relationship. If I have to be able to read into what my wife is really telling me and what makes her make decisions. And it's the same thing for Google. So you have to know, okay, what's making Google suggest these services, these businesses? And what is Google looking for to do that? Well, they want to see that the name, the address, the phone is consistent across multiple places because it shows you're a legitimate business and that you're not just trying to game the system or you're not a fraud. And they're looking for the website. Like a lot of times, search engine optimization is a term that I love to hear because I wrote loans 2000 to 2010, and that was during, I wear my cowboy. Remember the Lower My Bills Cowboys? They used to do the dancing cowboys. They had the silhouetted dancing cowboy. Like SEO and online marketing in that age, you never were going to compete with Quicken or Lending Tree or Bankrate, and you still aren't going to. what we do now, what's changed is cell phones and Google going to a local model where they're actually looking for somebody in the local area. And we don't try to rank the website. We try to use our website to rank the Google business profile. And that's what, it's just knowing these little things, because we'll still get someone there like, I used to do SEO. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be a fun call. Because that's like when the realtor tells you they were a loan officer in 2004 and that they know everything about loans, and it's totally different now, but they still, and it's the same thing. And I'm like, okay, well, we're not trying to rank your website because we don't want people in Kentucky calling you when you're licensed in Kansas. So let me show you what really works today. And then that's kind of what we do. And then it's just having the time to dedicate to what's working in our world. So I don't have to keep up with product guidelines anymore because I don't actively write loans, but I have to keep up with, say, what Google is doing. So Google recently changed from Google My Business to something called Google Business Profile. Oh, well, they just changed the name. No, they didn't. There's a whole reason why they did this. And you have to know the history going back. Google was Google Plus and Google Places before it became Google My Business. And now this Google Business Profile, what they're doing is they're moving in a direction like many online properties like Facebook. If you put a YouTube video on a Facebook post, it doesn't get any traction. Nobody sees it. Well, why is that? Because Facebook doesn't want somebody to click on a YouTube link and go to YouTube. They want to keep them on Facebook and on their platform. Well, Google wants to do the same thing on their search engine results. And, so they don't even want you to go to the website. They want you to stay within that profile and be able to interact with that profile and to be able to set an appointment from that profile, to be able to message the business from that profile. So it's knowing and recognizing where Google is going with this and then playing the long game to get everybody there faster than their competitors. So that's what we're doing, and that's why we end up with the better results.
So I think I experienced this the other day. I was looking the haircut place that I normally go right down the street. Of course, they have a big sign on their wall. Due to staffing shortages, we don't have enough people to keep this location open. Visit our location 28 blocks and 5 miles away. And I'm like, Jesus, there's got to be another barbershop between here and there. Right. So I went on Google and I'm like, barbershops near me. And instead of just showing me a list of barbershops, it gave me the one that I thought I would be most interested in. And then kind of over on the sidebar, it was like, here's their website, here's their this, here's this. And then within Google, there was a book an appointment at this barbershop.
Exactly.
So without even transitioning over to barbershop's website, I was able to book a haircut within Google.
Yes.
Now, the end of that story, and maybe you should do barbershops next, is an hour before my appointment the next day, he called me. He was like, hey man, I'm really sorry. Like my software's not interacting with Google. I don't have an appointment until 4:00. Then I was pissed off because my time is very valuable. I blocked out like 1:00 to
and hopefully you left him a negative review so everyone.
No, I don't want to beat the poor guy up, but I was like, hey man, I can't make it up after 4, and he didn't seem particularly interested in rebooking me, so I went somewhere else. But the point is, had he not had a software glitch, that's a new client. If I find a barber I like, I will go there until he pisses me off. So probably 3 or 4 years. So I get my haircut once a month, once every 2 months. That's 6 to 10 haircuts a year for 3 years, $40 each. That's $2,000 in revenue that he got by having a good Google business page, is what you're calling it, that operated within the Google framework. Is this correct?
Yep.
Am I conceptualizing this all right?
Yep,
okay,
that's correct.
So how does this work for loan officers? Like what's the win for the loan officer when somebody says Valencia, California, best loan officer, or mortgage broker, Valencia, or whatever?
Mortgage broker is the most searched keyword. So, and that's exactly how it works. So you've got to make them come up, and Google is a family business. And what I mean by that is they like their ants. They like relevance, distance, and prominence. That's my joke. So relevance, distance, and prominence. So distance we can't control. And that's where people are like, okay, I live in Kansas, but I really want to get loans in Kentucky. And you're like, well, it doesn't work that way. If you've got a business in Kansas, Google is going to refer you business in Kansas. So, and then you have the differences between what's called a service area business and an actual brick and mortar. And, so you could try to do a service area business, but then you're going to lose a tremendous amount of search ranking and you're going to get no map listings. So you want, and these are, again, I could start geeking out and telling you all this stuff, but that's exactly that. It's us following, seeing what works and what doesn't, and then optimizing it for the originator and having the right keywords in their name, having the right info in their description, having the posts on there regularly with the right content, the reviews that they get. It's just knowing, these are the different points that Google is looking for. Like you talked before about the different things across the internet. Why do they all have to be the same? Because Google is looking for that, and it shows them it's a strong business, and it should be among those search listings. So relevance is your is going to be your website. It's going to be your social media stuff. Google wants to make sure this is a relevant search finding. If I search for, sparkling water near me, it wants to give me this, Waterloo sparkling water and not an iced tea. Because iced tea is not relevant, this is. So you've got to tell it that they're relevant, and then you've got to make them prominent. And that's where things like the reviews come in. And then you've got to know the little tricks, like Google actually scans the reviews looking for the words. So when we ask for reviews for our originators, we give the consumer a list of questions and we say, by the way, if you need some ideas for your review, how did we do with this and how was this? Because that gets them to talk about those things. And you don't want to give them a script because they all copy and paste the script. So all of a sudden we did that. We did that first. We'll give them a sample script. We'll show them how it works. And then what they do is they all copy it and you go, okay, that's not going to work. Because if Google sees it's all copied and it sees it too many times, then it will suppress the review, meaning it hides it, doesn't show it to anybody. So we just know that, okay, we want to get these words in the reviews. Here's how we best get those words in the reviews. And it's just kind of keeping up with all of that stuff and then staying up to date with what other, companies and industries are doing for SEO for dentists and lawyers, what works with mortgage and what doesn't. Some things work really well. Some things you try to put them in our arena, like citations. Citations are when you have a listing on YP.com and Yelp and Google and, like everywhere out there, you want to be all, but you don't. Because if these things actually rank very high in your search findings and people click on them, they're not going to find your contact information. They're going to find ads because that's what those companies are really doing is generating ad revenue. And they're going to just have ads in their face. And that means that you have what we call leakage. People that were going to deal with Scott, but then they got distracted because here's this flashing 1.95. And you know that that's not true, but they don't. So they click on it and they end up down this rabbit hole and they fill out a form and then they're getting attacked by 9 different salespeople calling them every 30 seconds trying to get them to do an application. So we've learned, okay, you don't want to do that. This is how you want to do it. And we just, keep doing that and building on it and pivoting. So to go back to your original question, how did we come up with that formula? It was me recognizing that a small portion of your people are going to pay your bill and that the people, it's the same rule for the number of people that are going to implement what you put out there. So you said, I had this awesome app, nobody, but they weren't using it. We had that same experience where we had what I thought was the greatest array of tools. My initial goal, my emotional goal, I want to be everything to every originator. I want to give them all the tools they could use. And if they want, it was like a buffet. That's how I used to try to sell it. And that's how I held on to that belief so long. I'm like, it's like a buffet. If you don't like fish, don't eat fish. Just eat a lot of fried chicken. But people would still come to you and they're like, I don't eat the fish. I don't eat that meatloaf. Those collard greens look awfully old. I think I'm going to cancel. And then we were like, you know what? We're just going to be Kentucky Fried Chicken because we're going to find the people that need chicken and want to buy chicken and we feed them chicken. No burgers, no fish, just chicken. And that's what really works best for us. So it was understanding that we could do this extremely well. We do it for them so they don't have to implement, and that we don't give them too many options and choices because then they have negative feelings to it that they're not using it and that they would cancel. Because when we first started having cancellations, I would talk to everybody that canceled. I'm like, well, why are you canceling? They're like, well, I'm not using it. I'm like, well, didn't you get a loan from Google the other day? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, that was us. So I realized they weren't thinking about what we were doing because we weren't telling them about all the work we did over there. And they were looking at the stuff they weren't using that I thought was just bonus tools for some people. So we spend more time like, this is what we're doing for you and this is what's working. And these are the things that they could see working. And we try to focus on the tools like the auto posting and the email, campaigns that we focus on what we can do without the originators doing anything. And again, so product evolving. This year, we want to do more integrations so we can get your contacts into our system automatically, like you use a VA. So that's awesome. But a lot of originators don't, and they're not getting the contacts in. And if they don't get the contacts in, they're not getting the full value. So we're like, all right, well, how do we get their contacts in without them? And that's through integrations, through their loan systems or other CRMs. So that's what we'll work on next.
That's awesome. I want to shift a little bit just specifically from the stuff you do for mortgage people to just kind of your experience of growing a business because you have a very reasonable priced product at $300. Or that's the podcast discount. So if anybody's hitting up Helmer,
I was gonna say it's actually $397, but yeah,
you're right. Tell them that On the Edge podcast and Consolidated Coaching sent you, and you'll get a $100 a month discount.
You do.
But it's for the amount of work you guys do up front to build the website, build the logo, do the 90-minute to 2-hour onboarding, clean up all the websites. It's a massive undertaking and an amount of work on the front.
Yes.
But then it scales nicely because you never need to hear from me or...
Right. And we do still have a lot of back-end work that's done. There's a lot of consistent stuff, but you're right. It's not nearly as labor-intensive as that initial setup in the first couple of months.
Right. So just, I'd love to hear any insights that you've taken away, failure, success. Maybe we can talk about your biggest failure, which maybe was having the buffet, biggest success of running what I think is basically an information services product. And having that scalability and having that recurring revenue, and now you're building out to new team members. I don't know exactly how big your team is, but it's like, you've got some real knowledge here to share with maybe the non-mortgage people about just running a business, because a business is a business is a business. And I was talking to my buddy Al Said the other day, who and Al said something pretty insightful. He's like, the sad thing is every loan officer thinks they're going to retire in the loan business and they get stuck only doing mortgages. But the reality is, the skill set you and I have learned over the last 2 decades of running a business where you really have 2 sets of clients. I have my mortgage clients, which is B2C, but then I have my realtor clients, who is the gift that keeps on giving. They keep referring me new clients. That's B2B. And then you've also got to run a team if you want to be a top producer and do $100 million a year. So it's like those skill sets of working in the mortgage business, of knowing how to go B2B, knowing how to go B2C. And now you're probably just bringing most of those lessons into running an online company. It's a really interesting skill set. So I'm interested to hear like your experience of scaling this online business. Like, what was a surprise for you? What was like a direct takeaway from like, I learned how to do that in the mortgage business. It's just applying it to another business model. Like what's been the takeaways, the successes and the failures?
So